Hey Evelyn, how you doing?
I'm well. Thanks, Josh.
Me too. I can't wait till we're actually doing these things live as opposed to pre-recorded, but we're getting the technology working. So we just started. I just finished my call a little late, and it's just past noon here. So we were planning to record a conversation, and I mentioned to you how it's a sunny day, the first sunny day after 3 rainy days in a row. My battery is fully charged. I have time to cook, and then after we record, I can go back up and get a second charge today. It's just past the equinox, and the days are getting shorter, so I'm not going to be able to do this forever. And while we talk, I'm in my kitchen, and I'm going to make my stew, uh, my integrity stew,
Hmm.
which I've generally called my famous no packaging vegan solar powered stew. And I'll do my best to show what's going on. Um, and maybe you can ask questions if I'm not showing enough stuff. Um, but so that's a bit about me. How about you?
Great. Hi. More formally, I'm Evelyn Wallace. This is Josh Spodek, our host and mentor and guide. I'm great. Was that the question? How am I? What am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward actually to this accidentally being part of what we do today
The
because
cooking while talking.
cooking,
Do you
food,
mind
how
if
do we
I do
feed ourselves?
you mind if I move around while we talk?
Yeah, please do. So I'm just going to narrate some of my journey as Josh works his way in the kitchen. When he sort of like one of his um I guess like pitch is the wrong word because it's a real thing. It's not trying to get you to do anything. But one of the things, one of the defining stories of you is your challenge to yourself to go to eat packaging free for a week, right? This is one of the pivotal moments of your own journey, right? Am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Food was one of the big things that started it. Was my um, my challenge to myself to go for a week without buying packaged food. And there's a whole story behind that. But yeah, food has always been critical.
Right. So when I linked up with you, it I like
Here's my
I
battery, by
under
the way.
I understood that I understood like vaguely that my behavior as a part of like bigger cultural behavior was part of the problem. But I had never thought to ask myself, well, what does eating look like if I'm not eating as part of the problem? If my eating becomes part of the solution? And so, and like I had just, maybe not just, but I had finally found in my adult life competence in a what most think of as traditional kitchen, what Josh and I are now starting to think of as like weird and modern, whereas like what we're doing is more traditional. But you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I just learned how to cook like casseroles, but the good kind, with French names. And so
Uh,
here comes
casserole.
Josh Spodek. Go ahead.
Casserole. That was me saying casserole in French.
I get it. We got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Did you get my joke? Right. So when I started looking at food differently, I had questions that I was kind of embarrassed about as someone who considered myself competent in the kitchen. Like, how much dried beans do I get? That's a beet that Josh is showing us. He also
Carrot.
showed us his pressure cooker and a carrot, a purple carrot,
Carrot.
another
Yeah.
beet. Yeah, that's in my. That's funny. I guess what's in season, and I don't know what that is. Turnip.
That was the carrot on the inside.
Oh, right. The purple carrot. Yeah, so pretty. um, and like it's new food. My guess is that food like that you're cutting up right now ate up sunlight days ago.
Yes,
Like
although
I don't
probably
know.
the
We
leaves of
don't
it.
say that again.
The leaves of it, because it's a root.
Right. I mean, the plant itself
Yeah.
sustains itself on light
Let me
from the
explain
sun.
something. Okay. I'm gonna interrupt for a second.
Good.
So the stew is gonna have some greens, and this plastic bag came from when I need if I ever need a plastic bag. I don't know if you can tell how dirty it is. I washed it after I use it. It's probably at least a year or so old. So I go down to my building's basement, and that's where the recycling is. And people just throw stuff in there that isn't recyclable, such as this bag. So I'll go and get it out of there. But I don't tell them that I do that, because if they know that I do it, then they'll then they'll start getting this mindset of like, oh, Josh is going to use it, so I'll just put it in there. Like someone will find some use for it. Which, like, ocean plastic is like people find stuff to do with these things, but it's anyway. I do use plastic bags. I wouldn't use them if they weren't around, but if they are around, I'll use them. So I find that it keeps the stuff fresher longer. So this is from the CSA. This is some celery. So I got to put some greens. I don't have to, but I'm going to do the usual thing is a legume, a green, and a vegetable, a starchy vegetable like a carrot or a potato or a sweet potato or squash. So as we're speaking, I'm kind of figuring out what to put in here. So here I have also bok choy. So bok choy, I'm just going to share some of this of like my thought process.
Please.
The bottom part of the bok choy is juicy and tasty, so I like to eat that by itself. The top part cooks very quickly, so I don't have to put this in the stew because it uses power. Every mass that
The pressure cooker.
Yeah, pressure cooker. Because the energy to run the pressure cooker, the more energy I use, the more I have to climb the stairs. So I want to figure out what's the least. This is through practice. There's the pressure cooker.
Right.
I've learned that the less energy that I use, the less pollution. But I mean, the less I have to go up and down the stairs. Actually, if I mean, for the stuff off the grid, it's not polluting that much now that I have the bat, not clean, not green, not renewable, but methadone. My best stuff I can do so far. So what I'll probably do is cook the pressure cooker. Celery, this stuff is not the celery you get in a store. This is from a local farm, and it has much more flavor. This stuff tastes better when it's cooked because it's such a solid, it's good on its own, but this is not the sort of stuff like, well, it's still dirt on it, but see how thin that is compared to what you get in the store? Much more flavor. So this I like to cook. So I'll chop up some of this, put it in here, cook this, chop this up, the top part separately. When the pressure cooker's done, I'll put it in when it's still hot. So it'll kind of loosen a little bit, not loosen, but like not cook, but get a little more soft. So this one I'm going to cook and put in. So you saw I put the carrot in. You might have seen I put the green peas in. So the green peas I soaked over. The green peas, split peas I soaked overnight. Once they're in, then I'll start cooking. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
And
thank
now I'm
you.
gonna wash this. So I'm still listening. If I step off camera, it's because I'm washing the dirt off of this stuff.
No, this is great. I'm pretty much trying to assist and narrate and fill in the spaces of your cooking. So this is great. No interruption.
Is that useful stuff? Is it giving context of what I'm doing and why and explaining? Is it
Well,
helping people?
I already have a working understanding of how this recipe works. So like it fits into what I understand. If I didn't know it, I like to think that it was, but like I remember feeling overwhelmed by it when I first started trying to cook like this. So I found that sort of showing sequentially, I understand like what you're thinking and why, and that'll be helpful like once people have an understanding of like when they have vegetables of like how do I cook this. I think coming at it from like what is integrity stew and how do I make it? It's easy for me like to see it in order. So the things that need to be cooked most, like pressurized, right? Like beets I used to think of, and beans I used to think of as long-term cooking investments, right? It's like beans take a long time to cook. Beets the hard vegetables take a long time to cook. But when you cook it in this way in the pressure cooker with the water and the grains, you have, I mean, this is something that we should talk about is like how long to put it in. Josh has this like 4 minutes to 8 minutes window, I think. I've like aired on the end of overcooking because I once undercooked and hadn't really figured it out. But yeah, ultimately, like one of the bits of feedback I've gotten when I've showed other people how to do this is, oh my God, I've been putting stuff in the pressure cooker for like 35 minutes.
I know
So
all the stuff says to cook it for that long. It's like, it doesn't, you just, but anyone listening to this, just do it once or twice.
right.
I mean, for me, I kept wondering how to get a windowsill garden going. And it turned out just get one plant. It goes okay. And then start doing more and more and more. And just make a stew.
Right.
It's
I
like,
do think some of it, when you make a stew, like some of the important things, like I found a little measure. It's this tiny little ramekin that I ended up measuring out to be a quarter cup. It's just a quarter cup. And what I learned is to reduce my own food waste, that if I take one scoop of the legumes, whatever they are, pardon me, dry, so I can soak that one scoop, but then they still count in the recipe. Like ratio is just one scoop, even if they get bigger than that when they soak. You follow? So there's like one little quarter cup of beans, one little quarter cup of grains, and then like a hard vegetable, a whole carrot or two, or like a yeah whatever it is, um, and then 3 scoops of water per every one scoop of beans. So a 3-to-1 ratio for beans and a 2-to-1 ratio for grains. Any grains. Yeah, nice shot, Josh. That helped, and then enough salt, like a little sort of teaspoon or palm. Josh doesn't put as much salt in, but I find it much easier to transition from eating the old way to eating the good way, when the food is brought out with the salt. So yeah, that ratio with the legumes, um and the amount, like knowing, oh, maybe I forgot to say that part, that quarter cup, that teeny tiny little magic scoop makes 2 full plates. So I can eat 2 meals off that, and that tends to be the speed with which I can keep up with like food going bad. I can have lunch and dinner, or like dinner and breakfast the next day, or some version of 2 meals. Um yeah, just from a tiny, it's magic. I'll bring it next time. I kind of want to go get it. It's so tiny. It's hard to believe that that's all it takes to feed yourself twice, or to feed 2 people once.
yeah, beans are dirt cheap. I mean, literally dirt cheap. You could probably spend more on dirt for your garden than for beans. And it's
And
my number
water.
one food expense. Before the pandemic, I went and checked my credit card receipts and everything. And I spent more on beets than anything else, on
Beans.
dried beans than anything else. So
Wild.
now I got the beans, some greens. I got another. I happen to get 2 of these celeries, so I'm going to start chopping the other one too.
Nice.
Because I'm I've done this enough that I just know like about what the right ratio should be, what it looks like the right ratio is, and that's what I'm doing. Sorry to be out of picture for a bit.
No, it's nice to see the action shot of all the chopping and the yummy veggies.
And actually, see, I'm putting these are the stuff that I chop it up finely, so it this might be a little too much information for people the first time if they're not trying to live off of the grid in Manhattan. But I kind of want to share, like, to me this is fun to figure out like what are the um, how can I get how can I cook a full thing with less power, with less
Right.
energy?
It's like a riddle. Like, how do I keep solving this riddle?
I guess you could put it that way. I mean, to me, it's partly fun, partly like, well, I mean, ultimately, it's why don't I just why don't I just plug in? Because ultimately, what's in my heart is the people at the receiving end of this that would be breathing my pollution if I that I'm trying to reduce, I'm trying not to hurt people. And some
Right.
people think that's too big of a leap, but that's, I think that's people want to deny, they don't want to see, if they feel helpless, if they feel they can't do anything about it, then they're like, why tell me about what's happening over there if I can't do anything about it, making me feel guilty? That doesn't, how's that going to help anything?
Right.
But if you know that what you can do, that you can make a difference, so that's after the mindset shift from the Spodek method, then you feel like, oh, I can now I see how to make a difference. I want to learn more about these things. I want to act for the people that I would hurt. Not I want to hide myself from that. I want to hide. I don't tell me about it.
Right.
So why do I climb up and down the stairs? So that I don't hurt people, and that makes my life better. So if someone looks at this and like, just plug in, that's just looking at the superficial, the calories burned
Hmm.
and the easier the time saved in the moment. And ultimately you'll see that I'm going to make like 5 meals worth of food here, and that's while talking to you, so that slows me down. But normally this is like a 5-minute process to make 5 meals. And then the next one is just, I eat one after this, and then the next meal is like just cook. I mean, it's just like I just get the stew out.
Mhm.
So it's much less time. Anyone who's watching this and thinking, oh, he's got privilege, he's got access to farmers markets and CSAs, and he's got more time than I do, you're not getting it. I'm not saying to do what I'm doing. Don't copy me exactly. Follow the process in your life,
Right.
and you'll be able to do for yourself what I do for me in your way that works for you.
Right.
But broadly speaking, the alternative to this of like prepared food, McDonald's isn't doing anyone any favors. The reason people don't have time and money is because of McDonald's.
Right.
They're not saving you, and because of takeout and things like that.
Right. Can I
And
jump in
people
here,
can't
Josh?
leave kids. What?
Can I jump in?
Go for it.
As far as like McDonald's versus Yum Yum Bowl, Integrity Bowl, the no packaging vegan stew. This food, what I was thinking about, why is it so difficult to convince people how delicious this is and how nourishing it is? Like not healthy, like community service healthy. Like I did the world a favor by taking care of my body. I don't know. It's like food that feels good from the tip of your head to the tip of your toes. I
Uh,
always say that wrong. Top of your head to the tip of your toes. You, anyone who's had a bite of it knows. So I was thinking, why is this like food that by every measure is better, still isn't? It still takes persuading. It's still like it still takes. And I hear what you're saying about like we're not telling people eat this food, eat this way, but be open to the possibility that your behaviors are part of the problem. And if you shift your behaviors, like we have shifted our behaviors, the problem would look a lot different. We would shift the problem.
I'm gonna make. I haven't made what's it called in a while. Seitan.
Oh, fun.
So seitan is. I go to my bulk food store. I actually did this once from raw um, wheat berries, where I ground them in the blender, and then put them in water so the starch came off. But then it turns out um, my co-op has wheat gluten just by itself. So I'm gonna make. You can buy seitan in the store, and then it's packaged, and it's always got all. It's. This is really quick and easy. So I'm just gonna. I take 3 tablespoons, three of these.
Mhm.
I figure this out. I just figured this out. It's not like, and maybe there's a better way to do it, but my point is, I don't like recipes. I just added water to wheat gluten and made it into the paste that I'm about to show you. And then I decided it's a little better with soy sauce instead.
You should explain the packaging for the soy sauce.
Yeah, so this is like, I don't know how old this is, but they sell soy sauce or tamari sauce by the pound at the tofu at the co-op. So I've just been reading. This is like definitely pre-pandemic, and there's a story of how I got this. So I'm not going to go into. I didn't pay for plastic. Anyway, so I put in tamari to the gluten, and then I just stir it until it gets a particular consistency.
Like a mochi.
And again, I'm not. People are always like, Josh, you got to tell people exactly how to do the thing. That's not how I work, and that's not because if someone had told me what to do, I would never have started.
Mm,
The thing is, I'm like, all right, I want to eat, and I don't want to hurt people.
right.
And people live for hundreds of thousands of years without refrigerators, without stoves, without an electric grid. Why should having an electric grid, why should having these things make me more dependent?
Right.
If the goal is to have a better life, don't I want to be more liberated? Don't I want to be more resilient? My answer is yes.
Mhm.
So I'm figuring these things out, and there's no question in my mind someone can figure it out better than I could. Anyway, so now I got this texture of I put a little too much water. I don't care. So I got this kind of very doughy stuff. And if you're allergic to wheat gluten, sorry, you're not going to do this. But if you're not allergic to wheat gluten, there's no problem with it. I don't understand. Anyway, I'm not going to get into wheat gluten stuff. So I could, if I can either chop it now or chop it later.
Chop it
It's easier to chop
later.
it later.
Yeah, I
So I'll
think it
just put it
cooks
in.
better.
Actually, I have found that the flatter the more flat I make it,
Hmm.
it's easier to, it cooks more surface area to volume ratio.
Okay,
So
that's
I
helpful.
usually stretch it out a little bit. That's just something that came from practice.
Hmm.
Anyway, I put all the ingredients in there. Do I want to put anything else in there? I got a bunch of peppers here I could put in, but I don't cook those because then the flavor gets lost.
Hmm.
Just something I learned from experience. I do have something here. My CSA got, again, old plastic bag. It's edamame, and this stuff is incredibly delicious. So it just needs steaming, so I'm just going to put that in with it. And then I'll just have edamame snacks lying around.
You'll separate those out.
Yeah, because for those who don't know how to eat edamame, it's got stems.
Well, but the
Um,
pressure cooker also changes some stuff. Like I thought I couldn't eat like acorn squash peels because when I roasted them, they
yeah,
just still weren't soft enough. But in the pressure cooker, I can. So
yeah, you can eat squash peels. So now, I'm going to show the trick. All right. Anyway, so I turn on the battery.
this is
Oh, look, there
advanced
I'm
cooking
in the mirror
class.
too. So so I turn on, so the battery is now charging the pressure cooker, and I don't know if you can see, you're not gonna be able to see the readout, but anyway, turn it on, set it to 4 minutes, and then that's it. So now that
Four
was all the
minutes.
prep time to make this. And I was talking to you while doing it. It would have been a lot faster, more efficient without talking to you. Now, while I was cooking, actually, um, I just went to the co-op, so I was out of turmeric for a while. So I'm going to put together the flavorings that I put in it. Now, it doesn't need flavorings because it actually tastes great as it is. But nutritional yeast adds a lot of umami. I don't know. It gives it this richness
Hmm.
that, and
And B12.
it's B12 for the vegans out there, such as myself, and I mean, it's high in fiber, high in protein, high in fiber. It's like when people add cheese to stuff. That's when I had nutritional yeast. So let's see. I also get it from the co-op. So I get it by the pound. I go through a lot of it. And again, I'm just eyeballing how much I feel like putting in. Then I got so I kept learning about how healthy turmeric is. So here's turmeric, which I buy also by the pound. So I kept hearing it was super healthy and it's bitter, but I like it. So something like a heaping teaspoon. I'm just, you just do it one, there's no wrong amount. I just put it in and then
You
it
can't
turns out,
overdo turmeric, so careful.
yeah, and if you get the root, the root's really, it's more expensive, but it tastes really good and it's harder to find, at least here. Then I read that from Dr. Michael Greger, a podcast guest,
Mhm.
that pepper makes turmeric even yet more healthy.
Right.
Then this happens to be cumin, also bought by the pound. So I put some cumin in, and this is like my go-to stuff. I got some basil over there, oregano. And if I want, I could go basil, oregano for more Italian direction if I wanted to. I mean, there's also vegetables taste good on their own. So a little bit of salt. So I'll put in also by the pound. So I put in like I don't know, half a teaspoon for several meals worth of food. So now,
I like to add more.
when I serve it, if people are over, I put salt and pepper out so they can add to it, and they always do. Um, Oh, I also read that so kelp is supposed to be healthy in some way. I don't know. So I bought some kelp also by the pound. So here's a piece of kelp. I'll put that in. Chop it so it's not too big. Kombu, it may also be called. So that doesn't need to be pressure cooked because it's soft already. Actually, it does taste really good. Yeah, my deluxe bag, all these, I do use a lot of plastic bags, but the key to me is, am I paying for more extraction? And these aren't things I paid for. They're things that I get from neighbors or whatever. Now, there's the issue of plastics having poisons that leach into your food, such as PFAS and things like that. So I try not to let it get hot because I think heat will, but I don't know. I don't know. If someone wants to tell me what I should know about that, tell me. And, okay. I forgot I had the stalks to some, what do you call it? Kale. I took the kale off knowing that I was going to cook at some point. I took the leaves off to make a salad. And the stems, I knew I was going to, I could eat the stems raw, and sometimes I do, but I figured I'd put them in a stew. So now here comes the challenge. I got to open up the thing without it losing too much heat and throw these in really quick. So you'll hear it make a little noise as I throw it in so it gets pressure cooked without losing too much heat.
I'm at the edge of my seat, Josh.
No, sorry. No, okay. All right. So I put that in. So for those who don't know, the battery is sending energy to the pressure cooker. The pressure cooker is using the energy to heat the food. As it heats up, the water turns to steam and builds up pressure. And when the pressure gets high enough, then the timer starts. Because this only gives 600 watts. This doesn't deliver nearly as much power as plugging into the wall, so it takes longer to heat up. Just one of the ways we suffer when we don't use the electric grid. Oh, poor me. So once the pressure gets high enough, it'll cook. But you'll see this little trick that I do to get it to. I'm going to show this.
So right here, there's a little.
Your audio just went wild.
Sorry, is that better now?
On my end.
Okay. Testing.
I can hear you. It's a little grainy.
Yeah, I hit the connection.
Is it better now?
Yeah, as you come back online. It's quiet, but better.
Testing 1 2.
Better.
All right, I'm not going to move the camera. I'm not going to move the computer anymore because I disconnected the microphone. All right, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm not going to move it because the connection came off. I'm going to do a little trick that saves a little power and for a later episode.
I can go get the lid of mine and demonstrate.
So I think everything's ready now. I mean, I kind of want to go over there to wash stuff because I like to wash as I cook, but how did it look? I mean, to me, what I'm hoping to show here is, first of all, this is totally impromptu. I didn't prepare anything. Right. It's kind of neat to see down here, like all the vegetables and over there's vinegar, chutney, what's this, sauerkraut. And because I'm fermenting, I'm usually trying to ferment stuff because a lot of this stuff I won't be able to use in time. So I got to ferment because refrigerator. Oh, I hope it's not moldy. This bubble wrap. I got some bubble wrap, and I'm like, maybe I can reuse it sometime. And then the fridge, I don't know if you can see it, but the fridge is empty. Nothing in there. If I could reach back, I could show you it's unplugged. But I hope that I convey it's fun. To me, it's kind of creative. It's like what should I mix together, given what I have, and the fact that I have the bok choy and the celery is just like that's what I got from the CSA this week.
That's what I meant about riddle before. Like that, it's one component of it, sure, but like it's fun. It's like fun to play. How do I
Yeah.
put together these pieces and make? I mean, and the beauty is, like you said, there's no wrong answer. Do you want to talk a little about how plastic equals harm?
What do you mean?
I mean, it was a leap for me, and we talked a little before about like how you choosing, like you want to eat, but you don't want to cause harm,
Mhm.
right? You don't want to pollute, but I don't know if you said pollute. You said you need to eat, but you don't
I
want
don't
to
want to
do
hurt
it
people.
by harming people. So I think there's not like it's not the dominant narrative that we like what we think of as eating has harm all wrapped up in it, but we're separated from the most egregious effects of that harm, although it's sort of, I mean, I can see like topsoil blowing away, from my front yard. So some of the harm is visible to the earth, not necessarily the people. Anyway, I think maybe not like, I don't know. This isn't like like shame on you, or although I don't know if you're doing something shameful, by all means, be ashamed. But I think it was helpful for me to recognize the very direct, real equivalent between paying for plastic, participating in that chain, and the harm that plastic ultimately causes actual people and the earth.
Is it? Okay. I maybe there's something that seems obvious to me that I think is so obvious that I can't imagine. Plastic is made from fossil fuels. So if you buy something and part of the money is going to plastic, that means you're funding fossil fuels. So you can go and protest all you want. The amount of money that you're spending on fossil fuels, that's funding more extraction. Uh, and it gets burned in the process. So global warming is like one effect of it, but the plastic all ends up in the ocean. So plastics usually leach out chemicals that cause things like lower sperm count. It makes little tadpoles change sex and stuff like that. So it messes with the endocrine system, our hormonal systems. Um, it gets caught. I mean, I'm sure people have seen the pictures of the birds where they open them up and they have so much plastic, or the fish, the whales, they have so much plastic inside them that they can't fly, or it takes much more energy to fly. So it's killing wildlife. And we've all seen the plastic in the nose of the turtle. Um, the plastic, it doesn't break down. It just gets smaller pieces of plastic and gets into our bloodstream and things like that. And we don't have to use any of it. I mean, I'm using it because it's convenient, but none of this, I won't pay for it. In fact, one of my big challenges right now is that um, for various reasons, I had this thing of creatine, which is this stuff
Right.
that vegans are pretty low in. And I got it for free, so I didn't pay for it. So actually, I got it when I was picking up litter and it was totally sealed. I'm like, why is there a container of creatine here? I have no idea. I think it's because of all the crack row residents. So crack row is what they call it themselves.
Mhm.
Um, and or at least one of them did to me. So I started using this creatine. I think, oh, they shoplift like crazy. There's tons of stuff that's clearly shoplifted that they just leave there. So it's just there, and I start using it. I'm like, I start getting stronger. So now I'm like, oh, I want more creatine, but it all comes in plastic. So I'm like, and I can't. I've been looking for a place where I can get it by the pound, but they don't sell that stuff by the pound like they do dried beans. So one second, let me see if I can get this to go. No, not yet, right? Um, so to me, the biggest question is, am I funding more extraction, pollution, depletion? I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to drive more of it. So if I'm using it, if I like, I mean, this Tupperware thing that I'm using, I don't know if it's what brand it is, but like that was a neighbor was getting rid of it, so I got it. All the plastic bags are stuff that I'm like swimming in a world of plastic.
Right.
If all that stuff wasn't available, would I then die? No, I would do something different. But this is what's available, and so I'm using it. And I'd look forward to living in a world in which there's not so much plastic all over the place. But I don't mind using it. Like I'm not going to microwave. Well, the microwave takes more power than that to deliver, so I haven't used the microwave in a long time. But plastic, and also the whole lifestyle. When people get takeout, when I used to get takeout, it would produce so much garbage. I mean, it was like shocking, except that it was normal, statistically
Right.
normal. Everyone would do it. Like, well, what can I do? I can't help it.
Right.
Well, I can't. I don't want the disposable fork and spoon, but they do it. I can't stop them. It's so pathetic. But speaking of garbage, so this is my garbage for this year, since roughly January. So we're just about into October. So this is my garbage for the year. And what's in it? There's things like, you know, at some point I'll retire plastic bags. This bag has so many holes in it. I'm like, okay, it's done with that.
Right.
And a pen that I found that I used the pen until it ran out of ink.
Right.
And then here's like some fabric that got messed up. It's mostly plastic bags. Here, I went to the hospital, fucking going to the doctor. It's like constantly, they gave me this wristband. Like, is this unnecessary? So it's mostly a few plastic bags that reach the end of their life. That's 1 year. If I get takeout, it's more than that in one takeout.
Right.
This will work. Got it.
So what Josh is doing is like trying to manually elevate the little
Yeah, but by
component.
pushing the thing down, it temporarily raises the pressure. And if I do it just right, and it took me, this was after like years of doing this, but of having to go up and down the stairs all the time, it's like I value the energy. It's not just like I plug it in and there it is. So I learned this little trick, or I figured out how to do it so that it saves a few percent off the battery use.
Right.
So
Because
now this
energy
is
is
ready.
energy.
My own. Yeah, I don't have to.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to chop up some onions because there's the toppings. So I put the ingredients in already, and then there's stuff that goes in it that's not, I'm just rambling. So I'm going to put the stuff that goes on top of it doesn't get cooked. Like to pressure cook an onion, it totally loses all its flavor.
Right.
So they go on top afterward.
Yeah. Keep their kick.
And here, I don't know if you can see, like, so here's my compost. I just keep it on top of the counter. And when I get the chance to take it to Union Square, or now they have these little bins around, the city's getting on top of composting, then I empty it. But for several days, even in the summer, just keeping it in the container without air conditioning, without refrigeration, it's fine.
Right.
It feels like this big deal. I actually used to freeze it, but then I realized unnecessary.
Right. I have a follow-up question. So you had mentioned about your solar battery not being clean or green or renewable. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, read the book. Oh, there's a whole bunch of ways to approach it. From a human rights standpoint, the book Cobalt Red, and the guest, I recorded a podcast episode with the author of the book, Siddharth Kara. Highly recommend this book. If you think imperialism, colonialism, and slavery is a thing of the past, I mean,
you're wrong.
It's not like a fun read, but it's very well written, very well researched. He went into the mines in Congo, and all those things that you might have read of like sustainably sourced or stuff like that. You have to read it to get the words right. No sign whatsoever of any checking of anything. Child labor, children dying in mines, people, like, it's just a system that traces its back to, I also had his podcast guest, Adam Hochschild, who wrote King Leopold's Ghost, who wrote about Leopold of Belgium turning it into a slave colony, which was Heart of Darkness is what that was about as well. So Heart of Darkness was fiction, these are fact. But also to make, to mine the minerals, to make the batteries, to make the solar panels, all require fossil fuels. Then to transport it, to install it, to maintain it, to dispose of it, all use fossil fuels. There's no way to do it without. Maybe one day it won't, that won't be the case. Today in this world, it is. And so that's wind, that's solar, geothermal. Actually, geothermal is very limited. There's only a few places where that can work. And if people are like, oh, well, then we'll use Bitcoin mining. Well, oh, it's powered by geothermal, but then you're not using the geothermal for other things. So, but I meant to say hydroelectric. Hydroelectric has its own big issues with what it does to the environment.
Yeah, no kidding.
And
I just
I
drove
mean,
through like Washington State. Like they call themselves the Evergreen State. It's like the cutest marketing. Like maybe in an acre of your whole place, but the rest of it is desertified. And it like I kept seeing. So I mean, it's the Columbia like runs through Washington State, the river, right? The river of life, and it's like chopped up and tethered like by dams. It's whole way down, like everywhere
the
you can gain any sort of speed. There's a
the
dam, and
silt, the silt builds up behind them, so the dams have a lifetime,
what's that?
and then eventually run out. The
Right,
dams have lifetimes. They fill it with silt. I'm
right.
not an expert on dams. Just
But I mean, that's what we're talking
solar
about,
and wind.
hydroelectric.
Just look up solar and wind, and there. Who's a, what is a good? Just look it up. They're not clean, they're not green, they're not renewable. They have to be renewed every 15 to 20 years. Maybe that will be lengthened at some point, but not the ones now.
Mm.
Meanwhile, you know what's clean, green, and renewable? Eating plants, growing regenerative farm techniques, and just consuming less power, using less energy. And you know what else that does? It improves health, it improves safety, it improves national security. If everyone lived like I do, if people, all right, if you go from 99.5% uptime on an electric grid and you go to 99.6, that little 0.1 difference it means like building new plant. It means building lots of oversupply, which means building a bigger grid, peaker plants or nuclear plants that all pollute. Nuclear, you need fossil fuels to make nuclear, and you use it all throughout the process. And the heat, I mean, the heat is the real issue there, but in the long term. But the stew's ready. So now in principle it's ready, but it's still hot and there's a lot of pressure in there. So I let it cook a little bit longer, or rather I put it for less time than it needs, or I factor in how long it'll just take to
Naturally decompress.
yeah, depressurize. And see, a lot of people think, well, you want to be off fossil fuels, so I was going to go to these renewables, and now I don't have that. And so people feel like there's nothing left. You got to give me something. People lived without any of these things for 300,000 years as Homo sapiens. Call it 200,000 if you want. I don't know. Ask an anthropologist, but it's something like 300,000 years of Homo sapiens. And we didn't need this stuff. And then people are like, oh, you want to return to the Stone Age? No. We adopt sustainable values, stewardship, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Leave it better than you found it.
Plus, I was thinking about the Stone Age the other day as my kid like
live and let
almost
live.
ran into the road. I was like, you know what was happening, and like before we colonized this part of the world, kids weren't getting hit by cars. You know what else happens
Yeah, when one culture takes over another culture and brutalizes it, and genocide and slavery and things like that, then the culture doing the brutality has to tell itself at the individual level and at the cultural level, I believe I'm a good person, or I believe we believe we're a good culture, and we're doing this thing that's inhumane. So we have to convince ourselves that what we believe is wrong is right. What we believe is bad is good. And we do that. And so how do we do that? We say, well, we're bringing civilization to them, and we're bringing them out of the Stone Age, And so we project onto them this image of them that makes us look good. And we don't check, is that the case? So go check the anthropology. And so a lot of this for me started reading, especially Sebastian Junger's book, Freedom. No, I'm sorry, Tribe, but also all this anthropology stuff. Also, James Sussman's book, Affluence Without Abundance Without Affluence Without Abundance.
Right.
That's about the San in Southern Africa. And then reading about the Hadza. And then now I've had all these people on my podcast of who've lived among the Hadza, the San, the Tsumane, the Kogi, the Matses, and I never heard about them before, but they all talk about nature being abundant, nature being warm and nurturing. Here they say, oh, nature's trying to kill you all the time. We have to defeat nature. But people there are like, nature provides. Now, I'm not one of them. I'm not Hadza. I don't know. I think last time maybe we talked about those kids that like a 5-year-old who lives there knows more about living sustainably than I probably ever will. In the same way that a 5-year-old who speaks French, who grew up speaking French, is going to be better at speaking French than I ever will because they learn it natively. But we can learn from them. And that's not to say we have to be like them, because there's a lot of stuff that we did that was sustainable. I mean, Mozart and Shakespeare, Jesus, Lao Tzu, these are people who lived before we started using fossil fuels, before we started really polluting.
I see what you're saying.
And yeah, you could say agriculture was going in that direction, but we can do sustainable agriculture. So we can live like, there's a lot of stuff that we do that doesn't pollute and deplete, that's sustainable. Singing, dancing, writing, cultural stuff, sports. A lot of politics used to be about group decision making, not about winning. I mean, going way back, because I'm not thinking of Sebastian Junger's book and The Dawn of Everything, another big anthropology book, where they had this guy Kenny Ronk, this Native American at a time during the American colonial period, and he toured Europe, and he was like, "You guys live terribly."
Right.
Like you could see the abundance, and today, the Kogi.
Wait,
he
could see the abundance.
Alan Herrera. What?
The
Kogi live. They look at us and they're like, I asked Alan Herrera, like, what do they think of us? And he's like, vicious, cruel. We're isolated. And to say that they just live in the Stone Age is missing what we're missing. We're just projecting onto them what makes us feel better. Or rather, we might not be, I grew up in a culture that taught me that they're in the Stone Age, and they're too stupid and ignorant. No one said it just in those words, but that's what I took away. We have to help them. And the more I learn about them, the more I learn about them, the more closer I get with my family. The more in fact, my mom was just telling me about this book. It's called Hunt, Gather, Parent, or this woman who learned how not other cultures raise kids. And it's like very different than us. And I think a lot of us would consider it better if we experienced it and saw it, as opposed to have this picture of, well, it's a Stone Age. They're all dying at 30, but it's not accurate. It's
like projection. An easy way to put a whole thing in like this envelope of rejection without having to look at any of actually look at it.
Everyone looks at cooking and they're like, Josh, people can't afford it. They don't have access. It takes too long. It's too hard.
And you're like, nope, and nope.
Chief among these speakers would be me 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago now.
Oh, I love this. I love talking about your transformation. I think it's important to know, like, you weren't born this way.
Yeah. Here's some things. When I grew up, I didn't learn science to learn about how to conserve nature. I learned it because it was beautiful. And I wanted, like, when I learned physics, a lot of people don't get this, but it's really, really stunningly beautiful. And I wanted to be able to bring something to the world like Einstein did, like Galileo did. And I didn't know what my discoveries would be, and also the math was really beautiful. And I prefer experiment to just pure math, because I like that you can disprove something by through an experiment. I like to be able to do an experiment. So physics over math, but I could have gone math too. But it had nothing to do with conservation. I didn't know or care. I mean, I knew that there was like global warming, and I knew that there was pollution, but it was like, well, what can I do? All the stuff that everyone says, like what I do doesn't matter. Governments and corporations, they cause a problem, they should solve it. It's something I have faith in
And
the next generation.
also, in addition to all that, that whole list, we also tell ourselves, and I also have all this other important stuff to do. Like I have my job, I have my family. I don't have time to think about that.
Yeah, that's what you say when you feel helpless,
Mm-hmm.
among other things. And I mean, people who don't have kids, like they don't have time for stuff, and then they have a kid, and suddenly they have time for the kid, which is like much more time than anything they were doing before. And one, anyway, when I was growing up, I didn't learn physics to conserve nature. I didn't get the MBA. I got the MBA to get rich,
Right.
not because only in business school did I learn about leadership. And then after business school, I learned how to teach leadership more effectively. And I started teaching leadership and coaching leadership because I saw a way it was taught. I saw a way to teach it that wasn't being taught that I thought would be more effective. And I was going to help. And the more that I used it, the more my clients went from like just people that I knew to being like executives at Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies that were publicly traded firms. And I was supposed to have a wife and kids. I wasn't going to be a bachelor. I mean, now it's like, how many times do I have to go on a date? And a woman is like, when I say I don't fly, and she's like, I don't know if I can get past that.
Wow.
So there's never was I, and the reason my mom and dad and stepfather helped make the co-op in Philadelphia, Weaver's Way, and the before that the group of families that was basically a co-op. That was because they didn't have any money, they didn't have any time, and they had 3 kids. That was to make ends meet. That was, I guess you could say, it was being frugal. They weren't environmental. They flew around. As soon as my dad could get a grant to go fly somewhere, he got the grant and flew somewhere. My mom too. With her, it wasn't grants. I mean, my mom and stepfather just bought a luxury SUV. They don't get what I'm doing at all. I didn't grow up this way.
Right.
I grew up eating healthy because my parents wouldn't let us get sugar cereal or drink soda. It was like a treat to go to McDonald's.
Right.
We looked forward to that, or pizza. This is all, and my mom is like, oh, it's good that you and Greta do things like this, that you do sustainable stuff and then tell the world that you like it. I'm like, what do you mean tell the world that I like it? It's more delicious. I'm doing this like because I enjoy it. I got friction from my family, not inspiration. I got inspiration to like work hard on things. I get love and support, but not how to live sustainably. They don't, I mean, the other day I was talking to my mom and what does she talk about? When she talks about polluting stuff, we can tell that like that conversation's been had so many times. Yeah, I was telling her about Cobalt Red, the book, and she was like, oh, yeah, I don't need to like, how did she put it? It was something like saying, I don't need to bring that stress into my life.
Right.
See, she hasn't had the mindset shift.
Right.
And I haven't been able to do it with her. But
Can
after
I also
the mindset shift, I want to learn more about the suffering that I would cause, not less. So none of this I wasn't brought up this way. There was nothing in my training to do this. It just happens to be that everything that I did it has bearing here, but anything everyone does has bearing. So if you say, well, I'm not a physicist, I'm not an entrepreneur, I can't do what Josh does. No, we need what you do. Whatever you do is absolutely essential and it's needed. And if you don't act on it, if you don't bring it to the table, 1, we're all losing out. And 2, you're Thomas Jefferson. This big dichotomy in my book. Thomas Jefferson, brilliant writer on freedom. I mean, the Declaration of Independence is phenomenal. And he owned slaves and didn't stop himself. His classmate, Robert Carter III, did. Benjamin Franklin did. He owned slaves and then he got rid of them and he helped found anti-slavery societies in Pennsylvania. But imagine if George Washington, who also didn't free slaves until he died, both presidents of the United States, Virginia slave owners, had they shifted, had they freed their slaves, historians can debate the effects of it. Certainly the slaves would have been more free, would have been free. Maybe the Civil War might not have happened. Maybe they could have influenced the Constitution to not have the 3/5 clause, to not allow slavery in the states where it was allowed. Maybe they could have influenced the other states. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but possibly. I mean, but the big thing here is if you believe that it's difficult for you to change your life, and you think it's like, oh, the hardship of I'm married to a spouse who lives in Europe and I live in the United States, and we have to do one holiday here and one holiday there. What can I do? I have no choice in the matter. What would you say to Thomas Jefferson when he tells you how difficult it would be for him to free his slaves? Do you say, oh yeah, that's pretty tough? It wasn't so tough for, actually it was tough for Robert Carter III because his neighbors hated that he was doing this. He had to wait for the laws to change in order to manumit his slaves. But he did it. And we wish, if only Jefferson had, if only Washington had too, we could have been generations ahead of where we got. Or even if the Civil War still had to happen, the 13th Amendment might have been more strongly worded. We wouldn't have the prison industrial complex that we have today because of the clause that says, if you've been convicted, you can still have involuntary servitude. Maybe it would have come earlier. Historians can debate whether everyone saw the Civil War coming, but I think people basically saw it coming. If we could go back and talk to the plantation owners, I think some of them we could have gotten to see, like, even you don't want, no matter even how rich you are and protected you are from all these effects, and maybe even if you believe that the slaves are subhuman, you still don't want to go to war. Is there any question of the collapse that is we're at least at some risk of, if not huge risk of? Not to mention that there's already roughly 10 million people a year dying just from breathing polluted air, not in dirty factories, just breathing polluted air. It took the legislature centuries to reach that number, and that's 9 million a year according to the Lancet for the past, I think, every year since 2015. Look up in the Lancet. I linked to it in my blog
9 million people a year die from breathing polluted air.
Yeah. So look up the Lancet to see the details on that. And breathing polluted air is just one way people die from pollution and depletion. There's plenty of other ways as well. And do we think that's the number is going to go down? Do you think, is the air more or less polluted now? Okay, in a few places like LA, it's less polluted, but it's more polluted everywhere. And it's just more dispersed. I mean, some stuff we've cut out because of catalytic converters, but that's still somewhere. Anyway, we can prevent their levels of disaster. It's not we're all going to live happily ever after, or we're all going to die. There's levels. Cornell predicts that there could be 1 billion climate refugees in 2100, or there could be 2 billion climate refugees, depending on what we do. You can say, well, that's just a factor of 2. That's 1 billion people. Let's say all we could do is keep it down to 1 billion. That's still 2 billion people who would not be climate refugees. Now, there's all sorts of ancillary add-on effects of when you have that many people crossing borders, you're going to get wars and things like that. Maybe we could keep it down below certain levels of collapse. That's what everything we do either contributes or not to that. Now, what I add to it that no one else can add, as far as I can tell among sustainability people, is that it's joyful. It's delicious. It saves money. It saves time. It connects us with our families more, even if we're not spending love doesn't have to mean I go to see you, I fly to you every holiday. That's what Jefferson was living. And at first I thought, what are you taking his statues down for? That's crazy. Have you read the Declaration of Independence? He was such a man of his time, but he wasn't a man of his time. First, there were lots of people that weren't living that way. And also, you read the notes of State of Virginia, and it's incredibly racist. And that racism emerged. It's not racism caused slavery. Slavery caused racism. That's if he's like, how do I soothe my conscience when I'm doing the stuff that I believe is wrong? Well, I got to convince myself that they're subhuman. I got to convince myself that they're not capable of anything more, that we are and they aren't. And that's what we're doing today. We don't convince ourselves racist thoughts. I mean, some do, but with regard to the environment, we convince ourselves that what we do doesn't matter. What parent tells your kid, oh, you'll grow up one day. What you do doesn't matter. Is that something to teach your kids? Only governments and corporations can make a difference. What do you think how do you think this stuff happens? And since when do we think it's such a bad thing to live sustainably? Why is that such a burden? Why do people believe it's a burden? Because they don't want to, I've been going on for a while. How does this sound? Is this going to be useful for people to hear?
I mean, I'm here. I'm down to have the conversation. I guess we'll find out. We'll find out. I feel like that question though, it's a good, we probably could like wrap up that question of like, why aren't we? Why are you the extremist here? You, the one who's living in a way that if we were all doing it, things would be better. And not just like by a measure of, not just an external measure of like, okay, we prevent ourselves from extinction, but yeah, because it is more delicious. It is more community building. I actually pulled up a picture on my phone as you were saying that. This is a picture of the food that I made the other day.
Really, that's one of yours.
That's what this food is. It's like and it always comes out that delicious looking, even though it's different things and it tastes different, but the deliciousness is universal. And a few things I was thinking, like originally I had brought up like why don't we think of the best food, the like top of the head to the tip of the toes yummy food as like good and yummy and nourishing, but we think of McDonald's or like the doof as like what food is. Why is that? And why is it that we think one is expensive and one isn't? It's like what you were saying. No, this is expensive because of them. And I like basically I realized like no one is there's no marketing department for the Integrity Bowl. You know what I'm saying? There's no corporate interest that backs legumes. I mean, maybe farmers and like I don't know, maybe you could go down that hole, but I feel like if we can just agree, if we can just step out of like our own hypnotization and agree that what we've been told by the moneyed interests that want us to buy their product is maybe not true. And maybe
now there's a lot of people who hear that and be like, you're so naive.
Me?
Yeah,
I'm so naive.
like you don't know how markets work, and you're like anti-capitalist, and you don't get it. And capitalism has left more people out of poverty than anything else. So you really have to get to. I mean, the book talks a lot about how did these systems emerge? How did the cultures
Josh wrote a
come to be
book
this
that's
way?
it's upcoming and it's publishing, for the record.
Yeah. So the book that I'm working on goes into this of like how these things came to be and why it's not, if you just say, can't we all just get along? That's great for some people that's the perfect message.
Is that what you thought I was saying?
No.
Okay.
I'm saying if people have to be spoken to in a language that makes sense to them, and I think they have to be heard. They have to feel understood before they're going to listen. So if you just say this stuff is more delicious, they're like, yeah, but my stuff is even more delicious. There's people, their defenses aren't there because they don't know. The defenses are there because they don't, for lots of reasons.
Because we've been taught a thing we didn't realize we were taught. And we just take it as like, and we've been taught by teachers that are corporate interests. Commercials aren't like real, right? These narratives of what food is supposed to be isn't real. And that we've adopted it unconsciously. And I mean, humans have to learn a lot of things unconsciously. That's like part of the shortcuts of how brains work. That's great. But like just that small edge of like willingness to reflect on maybe the way I'm doing things isn't the only way. Maybe there are some things I learned that aren't real, that aren't right, that aren't true, that I could do better. That's the mindset shift that.
Yeah, the mindset shift. That's what I was about to say. Is that that's what how do you lead someone to have an epiphany? How do you lead someone to have a mindset shift? That's why it took years and years to develop the Spodek method. I wasn't like, I want to develop the Spodek method.
Right.
It was, I was working with people and asking myself these questions. And if you listen to the early podcasts, you can see or hear the development. As at the beginning, I was convincing, cajoling, coercing, seeking compliance, and like, why don't you try this? Well, because at first my avoiding packaged food experiment was originally not designed to engender mindset shift. It was to reinforce, oh, the cure is worse than the disease. So I can, if the cure is worse than the disease, I'll stick with the disease and keep polluting.
In other words, you
Cure
didn't
of
want
not
it to
polluting is
succeed.
awful.
Yeah.
Right. Success would have been to reinforce not having to change my behavior, so I could just be like everybody else. Now, as it turned out, I had I had a mindset shift of, oh, this is better by my values, by basic human values. So I had a mindset shift, and that led to a process of continual improvement. But I didn't connect that until later. Actually, I was working with Shell, an executive at Shell, that I put together like what was specifically what's happening.
Okay.
But it enabled me working with these super majors, these big polluting companies, to help. That's the top-down approach.
Sure.
But it took me a while to realize how to lead someone to have that mindset shift.
Right.
It's not like I want you to have a mindset shift. Like me wanting it doesn't make it happen.
Right.
So what worked? I realized a lot of it had to be, what was their intrinsic motivation?
Right.
Which my book Leadership Step by Step, which is already out, that talks about, to lead someone, how to evoke what motivates them. Usually they forget about sustainability for a second, or table sustainability. Just in general, if you want to lead someone, you have to know what they want. You have to know what motivates them. Right. Most people don't. We protect those things because those make us vulnerable. If I know what you care about, I can hurt you. I can take stuff away from you. I can laugh at you. I can manipulate you. So we learn over time to protect ourselves from sharing these things. So people don't share their inner motivations so often. But if you learn the skills to ask meaningful questions that were effective questions, and behave and communicate in ways that are supportive and non-judgmental, so that they feel like, oh, this is someone I can share this with, then it comes out. And then when you have something inside them that was already there, not something imposed by you, then you can lead them.
Right.
If that's not out in the open and they're protecting it, and you get it off, they're doing it for reason X, and you think it's X prime, and you start leading them, that little difference becomes really annoying for them. And they feel like, you think you understand me, but you don't. And if they try to explain it and you don't listen, or you don't hear it, or more often it doesn't come out, and you're like, oh, all of them over there, they don't care. They just don't care about the environment. Right. You've lost your ability to influence them if they know that you feel that way. If they do care, and everyone cares. Everyone wants clean air in their lungs. No one wants polluted water for their kids. So if you say the person doesn't care, and inside them they do care, then you, from their perspective, you don't understand them, and so that why would they listen to you? Right. So the whole, where you're coming from, and how you live, how you communicate. Do you communicate support and non-judgment, or do you convey judgment and self-superiority, which is, oh, they just don't listen to the science. Right. Gone is your credibility with anyone who, there's a lot of questions about science, and you've just lost your credibility with them. So there's all sorts of things about how you have to live and behave and communicate and listen and show compassion and support, not fake it, live it. That's what
and also you still might say something nicely and kindly and compassionately, and they still might hear judgment.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of people are going to hear what they expect to hear. And so it's like really hard work. The hard work of sustainability is not, how do we make fusion energy? That will not be sustainable. The hard work is, it's both hearts and minds, connecting with hearts and minds of others. But before that, it's doing the work on yourself. Right. To be someone that they're going to listen to. Right. If that's why Thomas Jefferson failed. He didn't do the hard work on himself. And presumably Robert Carter III did. there's not as much written about him. But you can't lead other people to live by values you live the opposite of.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying it's simple. I mean, here's the simplest way to put it. If you do something that kills people and you don't want to kill people, you have to stop doing that thing, even if you really like it. That's very simple. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, because if you live in North America and your spouse lives in Japan and you have families in both places and you want to see them, that's a big challenge. It's a challenge like Thomas Jefferson faced, and in my opinion, failed at. And I first thought his statue should not be taken down, and now I agree it should be taken down or put up and honored, and then we have to say to ourselves, and we're just like him. But I think we should learn from him. Apparently, as he got older, he just isolated himself more because he couldn't get around this.
Good. By the way, I know this is standard terminology, slave owner, slaves, but the reality is no one can be a slave owner because no human can be a slave. So ultimately, they're human traffickers. And when they freed their slaves, they chose to stop human trafficking. It's a more accurate telling.
So there's some tribalism in that of some people say it one way and some people say it another way. And I don't want to get mired in tribalism.
Yeah, most people say it one way. I find that one way to be incorrect and part of the problem. But you don't have to change how you say it. I haven't really no one else is really on board. I haven't started a movement. I just personally want to speak up against language I find to be continual of the mindset of oppression. Even if what you're saying is that thing.
I mean, my understanding of ownership is it's illegal. See, I'm not going to get into this. I'm going to speak this way, and if you want to send me literature for me to learn something, but it seems that's my understanding of ownership. Of it's a legal thing. It doesn't say anything about the people, but the behavior is what I'm talking about here, and the opinions of how the mindsets that people have, and whatever words you put on it. Thomas Jefferson had access to a political system that could, with violence, force people to do things that they didn't want to do.
Right.
And we have something like that today. It's not that we're forcing labor, although we are, but we're doing things that are, I can do something that I can turn on the ignition to a car and cause gas to come out, exhaust to come out. Or better yet, if I blow smoke in a baby's face, I'm not a lawyer, but I think you could get me for assault. I'm not sure. I'm sure it's a crime. If I buy an airplane ticket, I cause millions of times more pollution to enter the world. And there's no question that that pollution affects people, not acutely, but it does. But the first thing is a crime, and the second thing is legal. Mm-hmm. That's a mistake. If you believe that one of the roles of government is to protect life, liberty, and property, pollution destroys life, liberty, and property. If you believe a role of the government is to protect you from my destroying your life, liberty, and property, then our government is not doing one of its fundamental roles.
Right.
And that means it's anti-democratic. And if I'm making something and selling it to you and someone else is paying the costs of cleaning it up, that's not a free market.
Right.
If I make something with slave labor, that's not a free market.
That's right.
If I make something where I can unilaterally decide to make something and you end up sucking down the fumes and you have birth defects because of something I did, that is not a free market. Mm-hmm. That is a coercive market. So if we want to have free markets, if we want to have democracy, we can't have pollution. Lincoln saw it, that there was a house divided. if you say this group, you can have freedom.
Right.
This group can own that group.
Mm-hmm.
Use your language.
No, right.
Then that is a house divided, and ultimately everyone saw that it can't work. If you have fugitive slave laws, if someone from this state goes into that state and comes back, what happens? There are all sorts of things. It just you can't get it to work. I mean, they thought maybe some people thought, well, in some states you can have slavery, and some states you can have free, and then we'll just be some union, but the union can't allow both.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say this group can have life, liberty, and property, and this group can pollute, can destroy that other's life, liberty, and property, that is a house divided. It can't, there's no way to reconcile everything else.
Sure.
And Lincoln saw, he said that we must have a path to an ultimate extinction of slavery. And he, among many, helped make that happen. And we have that opportunity today, which would be one of the great achievements of humanity, to restore the lost values of stewardship, of the golden rule,
right.
of common decency.
Right.
That we still have one-on-one. Like if I bump into my neighbor, we're going to practice do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We practice live and let live. We practice leave it better than you found it. But once it's mediated through the environment, that interaction, I buy an airplane ticket, now it's not direct. Somehow that all goes out the window. We've lost that. The only consideration most people have for flying is, can you afford it? Do you have time? And if you say to them, well, what about the people affected by it? Oh, they don't want to hear that.
Or it's not my fault. I'm just one of many. The plane was already flying. Yeah.
Our culture has abandoned it.
Mm-hmm.
Our culture has abandoned that perspective.
Right.
So I want to restore that. And I think, and we will be better off. Jefferson would have been better off had he, had he done something that led them to have a different state of freedom relative to him.
Mm-hmm.
And if he'd, like Robert Carter, given them his land even more, which that was a big problem with Reconstruction, that there wasn't land distribution. Well, all those people taken from that's a whole, they live in a place, Africa, they were in Africa, they had land, and they get brought here and they get no land.
In addition to all the other things they don't get.
I'm just talking about the land part.
Right.
Then to say that it's not redistributing land, it's fixing what was taken away.
Not to mention, there were people here when the colonizers started coming and digging it up. I mean, we can't. Yeah.
And but I was just addressing Reconstruction there. One of the main reasons why Reconstruction failed was that the land was not redistributed. And redistribute is not the right term, because how do I put it? It's like if people are taken from someplace and brought someplace, and then here they're not allowed any property or not allowed any real estate.
The land was not equitably distributed based on historical context.
It wasn't. Yeah, it's not to say the land should be redistributed during Reconstruction. It's like it was never. I don't know. I got to work on this to describe how it's not redistributing the land when it's not that the land was stolen from them. There were other people it was stolen from, but it's.
All right. Well, that'll be your homework for next time, because we should probably wrap up.
So we're like 90 minutes in, or not quite that much?
We started just after 9, and now we're at the 30.
I wish you could smell the flavors in here. It's
divine.
Oh man. Yeah.
I believe you. I've been
so
there.
I'm gonna just wrap up. Like here, I don't know if you saw, I was chopping up the hot peppers, some onion. This is the
celery, bok choy.
That's so good. That's the bottom part of the bok choy. And then when it opens, I'll put the top parts of the bok choy and the top parts of the celery, and put this stuff on top. or put the flavorings in, mix it all up. Oh, I'll have to. Anyway, and then I'm gonna eat.
Bon appetit.
Oh, and I'm gonna eat the edamame on top because that doesn't require me. I mean, it's so good. I wish I could describe the flavors. I love Big Macs. I grew up in Philadelphia and I loved cheesesteaks. I'm never gonna have a cheesesteak again in my life. I mean, there were vegan ones that I've tried, but they're all these vegan places that are just taking stuff manufactured in some factory somewhere
Right.
and they're just reheating it. I'm like, well, I could do that. And
Right.
but I don't want to do that because this stuff tastes better.
Mm-hmm.
It's cheaper, it's faster once I learn how to cook.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff is so I wish people would eat this. And I do want to do some pop-ups and get have these stews spread. It's
Right.
it's so quick and easy.
Just takes a dinner party. People are hooked.
Yeah.
I guess you don't want to have all of New York in your apartment. I get that. That's a problem we can solve as time goes on. I'm going to need to log off. So
Okay.
thanks for your time.
Did I go on too long? Was it
No, we're doing great.
I had
People
so
can
much fun
listen or not
talking.
listen. We can talk as long as we want.
What I mean is from your perspective, was this useful for listeners? I don't know, because and did you get a chance to talk enough?
Did I get a
Yeah,
chance?
we're still recording.
Right.
Did I talk too much?
I don't know. Let's find out. I never
Okay,
know how
well,
much. I never know the ratio of voices until I listen. I always think I'm not talking that much, and then when I hear the recording, I realize how much I go.
okay, yeah,
So
that's why I was asking. Anyway, I also wanted them to see we're just figuring this out because
we are just figuring
years
this
from
out.
now, when we're on TV or whatever, they'll be like, oh yeah, they were just trying to figure that out from the start. All right, so I'll stop recording.
Okay.